Hi, I'm Odessa Lewis for the Power of the Patient Project. My guest today is Jennifer O'Brien. She is the author of The Hospice Doctor's Widow. Jennifer helps people talk openly about caregiving and loss. Throughout her book, she provides a real look at losing a loved one through art that includes collages, notes, and images. It is a heartfelt story that many find healing through reading who are going through something similar in their lives. If you have gone through the hospice experience and dealt with losing someone you love, Jennifer O'Brien's book chronicles a story about grieving and loss. It is a helpful guide and it's illustrated beautifully. Welcome, Miss O'Brien. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me,
You're
Odessa.
welcome. You're welcome. Please tell me about your book, The Hospice Doctor's Widow. What would you like people to know about it?
Well, I would like people to know that it is a picture book. It is 8 by 10 in size and color. And I don't know if you can see all those frames behind me,
Yes.
but that's all art from the book.
Okay.
So, right. So, yeah. So it's an easy book. It actually gives you sort of, this book will never be an ebook. It will never be even probably a paperback, because when you are going through caregiving, family caregiving for a loved one, which is what I was, and then grieving, this gives you something to literally hold on to.
Okay.
And that it's easy.
Right.
It's a tough topic. And because of the art, and because my husband was a physician, and I was able to sort of include his wisdom right in the book.
Right.
It's a book that it is easy to process during a difficult time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In your book, you chronicle losing a loved one, your husband, Bob. More importantly, you share with others the journey who may also be going through the same thing. Have people reached out to let you know about, how they feel connected to your story?
Absolutely. The book is about two-thirds my caregiving process, taking care of Bob and us preparing. He was diagnosed with a stage 4 metastatic cancer. So it was not as, yes, we had times of hoping and getting more time together, but at the end of life comes death, and we both knew that unequivocally. So the book talks about how I processed all of that and took care of him as a family caregiver. And then about a third of the book is my journal from after he died. So it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit unusual in that way that it takes the transition. So what's so cool about that, specific to your question, is that the book has ended up helping lots and lots of people, even in those two roles, caregivers, family caregivers. It's very clearly helpful to them. People who had already lost their loved one have either gotten or been given the book, and they found great validation in how they had felt along the way.
Okay.
And the other really cool thing that's been a total surprise to me, but nevertheless wonderful, is that I get this feedback a lot. I bought your book for my friend so-and-so who's mother has cancer, or husband was just diagnosed with ALS, or whatever the story is. And then they kind of say, and I read it before I gave it to them, because, it's not very long, and it's something compelling. And they tell me two things. Most importantly, this book has helped me become a better friend to someone. Yeah. Right. To someone going through, either the caregiving or a recent loss. And that, I'm going to just tell you, Odessa, that just warms my heart, because there are many, many people going through loss.
Right.
And we don't talk about it enough, and we don't report it enough. We have sort of in our culture this notion that, we can't talk about death before or after it happened, which is just silly because it happens to quite literally everyone.
Exactly.
We know that it's going to happen, right? And the end of our lives are just as important, or perhaps more important, in the survivorship of our loved ones as the care that we receive, throughout our lives. I mean, that being able to approach end of life openly, both, patient, the family caregiver. I wish doctors would talk about it more openly with each other and with their patients, because it is incredibly important part of people's lives, both patient themselves and then the loved ones who carry on. I have this thing I call the triad of certainty.
Okay.
At the end of life comes death. There are no do-overs in end of life. And changed forever, the loved ones remain and remember. And when we think about, the care of those loved ones who remain and remember, part of what goes into their futures and their life is making sure that we handle the end of their loved one's life well. That if we don't talk about it and if we don't prepare for it, there's a lot of regret. And regret is not good medicine
at all. Yes.
Regret is not good medicine. What Bob and I did to prepare for his death, which I talk about a lot in this journal, and I also talk a lot about my own thoughts and feelings as his caregiver. What we did really, really helped me to not only help me to prepare for his death, but helped me to prepare for my own survivorship. It did not make it any less sad. I don't miss him any less. What it did provide was me to be able to transition more naturally from caregiver to griever, me to advocate for him at the end of his life when I knew he wanted certain things. He didn't want visitors. He, all sorts of specifics that he had told me. And I could say, no, he doesn't want that. He wants this, when he was unable to speak for himself.
Okay.
I was his agency at that point. And then, of course, when he died, I knew exactly what he wanted in a memorial service. I didn't have to, we had already done a lot of the paperwork, like put the property in my name. We had done it. And so I was able to just focus on loving him up until the last breath, and then carrying out his wishes after he died. So that end of life is just such an important part of your life. And then it's a huge part for the folks that go on after you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what advice do you have to those who are struggling with the loss of a loved one or taking care of them while knowing heartbreaking details of their illness?
Yeah. So let's take that separately because there's such different circumstances. Okay. Let's take the caregiving first when their loved one is still living. And this advice comes from 1,000 years ago when I worked with an oncologist. And he used to tell his patients at every visit, we hope for the best and we prepare for the worst. And what was important about that, so the language is pretty understandable. We hope for the best and we prepare for the worst. And it's an and. It's not an or, okay? It's both. We're going to do
Right.
both. We're going to do everything we can to treat this cancer or whatever it is. And we're going to prepare. We're going to do both.
Mm-hmm.
And the other reason I think it's important to come back to it over and over again is because the best and the worst change with time. At first, the best might be a cure,
Right.
and the worst might be death. As time progresses and the disease may progress and the treatments may or may not work, right? Then the best is quality, pain-free time. And the worst is suffering.
Okay.
And we're constantly sort of balancing that hope and that preparation. Mm-hmm. Because as we said earlier, even after a cure of whatever it is, at the end of life comes death. It is never a waste of time to have conversations and prepare for end of life. It's never a waste of time. So hope for the best and prepare for the worst, and check in with each other often. Where are you on hoping and where are you on preparing? You know, this is a great way to broach the conversation with your loved one, and trying not to, when your loved one is in a hope moment, trying not to rain on that parade with a prepare, right? Directive and so forth. So anyway, that's the advice for folks going through illness right now. For folks who have lost someone, I can tell you there are no, other than not doing harm to yourself and others, there are no rules, right? Some people think you should be out and about within a couple of months. Some people think, you know, anything can happen. You can sleep a lot. You can be unable to sleep. You can eat a lot. You can be unable to eat. All of these things that feel not right are perfectly natural reactions to loss. And our friends and our relatives need to understand that as long as we're not harming ourselves or others, we are processing our grief how we need to. And that's hard for people to understand, especially folks who haven't been through it. There's sort of a fog that happens after you lose someone, even when you prepare, which is another reason to prepare, because a grief fog kind of settles in your brain and you don't think as clearly as you want. So yeah, that's probably those two sets of advice for those two scenarios.
Okay. So in your book, The Hospice Doctor's Widow, you're able to tell a compelling story about how to deal with the loss through collages, images, and notes. How do you manage to find a bit of light during an uncertain time?
Well, a couple of things. One, the book was never intended to be a book. Okay. It was just my diary. It was my art journal. Yeah, I know, right? Nice. It was my art journal. And that is part of the way that I find self-care. I'm a self-taught artist. So when my husband got sick, I turned to art journaling as part of my method of taking care of myself and processing what was happening. It just so happens that I kept going with the journal about a year and a half after Bob died, at which point I was working with a large practice, and a neurologist I was working with was diagnosing 3 different patients with ALS. So I brought my journal in to show him, and he took it home, and he came back the next day and said, "Yeah, you're not getting your journal back. I will be loaning it to these patients and their spouses. And you need to figure out how to get that published, because that's really helpful. That book helps cover a gap between what the physician can provide, the specialist can provide for the patient, and what the family caregiver really needs." That's what that book does, or that journal. And so I went to work and found a publisher, small press, and they were willing to take a chance on it. So So, I think it's compelling in its authenticity, right? There is this, like I said, not written as a book, written as my journal. It's like reading the doctor's wife's journal when she's going through the exact same thing that you're going through. That it's that simple. I mean, at least, or I think that it's that simple. And so the light comes in, to me, the light comes in recognizing that when you're going through something difficult, there are different brightness of light. Sometimes the light is dim, and it's just leaning in and having a tender moment with your person, comforting them in some way, or, you know, having a moment that validates your love for them, or your steadiness and your conviction to take care of them. So kind of, we're not looking at elation. We're looking at contentment. We're looking at peace. At one point during my husband's illness, I found a little note he had taped on the inside of his medicine cabinet that said, in acceptance lies peace. And that is, we need to accept where we are so that we can come to terms with it, so that we can work within where we are and be peaceful. And so the light is a little dimmer sometimes when you're going through a rough stuff, but you still find it. And now for me, the light is that the book is helping so many people. You know, that's really the light.
Okay. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me to interview you today. I've enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. I guess that's it. Thanks once again. My name is Odessa Lewis, and this is the Power of the Patient Project. You have a good one, Miss O'Brien. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Odessa. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Goodbye.